I say we take this outdoors before it gets too hot. All right, so thank you for that introduction, and also thanks for providing books for everybody. This book is about how to see all of these trends that are taking place, not just AI, but all of the subsequent trends after that. There are many evolutions of AI to come. There's also quantum computing on the horizon, and it's just a way to make sense of these technologies so that you're adapting your business before these trends take effect. And that's what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about today. So in my role as head of global innovation at ServiceNow, I spend time with companies in every industry of all sizes around the world. And one of the things that is pretty much common throughout all of my engagements is that companies are trying to figure out, what do they need to know? What do they need to do? And then the more, I'd say, progressive companies are asking, what do I not know? What do I need to know that I'm not thinking about? And that's exactly the right question to ask, especially with everything that's happening in an era of AI. Now, nothing says innovation like some slides, but before I get to that, I want to set the stage a little bit. I have studied pretty much every technological revolution going back to the 1990s. I've written over 60 research reports on their impacts and what they mean to every industry, what the future of business can look like, both business models and operational models, how leadership needs to transform, how we should think about investments, how we should rethink ROI. And I can tell you that pretty much the majority of the companies that I've worked with see technology revolutions as an opportunity to make their organizations more efficient, to drive profit margins, to scale, to do all of the things that we have basically done since the Industrial Revolution. And I'm trying not to be overzealous when I say that artificial intelligence, this wave of AI, is probably the most disruptive technology that we've seen in history, which means that we have to do more than think about efficiencies, think about automation, think about scale. We also have to think about exponential opportunities, the things that we couldn't do yesterday versus the things that we did yesterday to be better, faster, cheaper for tomorrow. This is Sam Altman. He's the CEO and founder of OpenAI. One of the products that they make is ChatGPT. He recently said that this is the most interesting year in human history, except for all future years, which was a very nice way of saying, be ready. It's only going to get crazier. It's only going to get faster. And we're already having a hard enough time keeping up with all of this stuff. This is another prolific Silicon Valley luminary. His name is Vinod Khosla. He's probably one of the most prolific investors going back to like the 90s. He recently posted this: most businesses have no clue what is about to hit them in the next 10 years when most rules of engagement change. I thought that was a pretty ominous post. So I stopped and I thought, well, what does he mean by that? What does he mean by rules of engagement changing? And what does he mean by we have no clue what's about to hit us? And so I spent time dissecting this, because when we see posts like this, we think that there'll be like something that happens overnight. There'll be a headline that says, okay, everything's changed. All the rules of engagement have changed. Get ready, let's go. But this happens incrementally. It's happened with ChatGPT. It's happened with 3, 5, 4, everything that's next. Everything's changing overnight. So by the time we hit 10 years from now, everything, of course, will have changed, but it has been changing. And that's the point of Mindshift, which I hope you take a copy. It is, how do you start seeing these things and asking questions now so that you can think differently about your investments moving forward? So someone who studied digital transformation over the past 20 years, most investments didn't pan out. In fact, there was very little transformation in digital transformation. And I want to give you a quick, oversimplified version of why. It was because we didn't actually try to transform. We didn't see our businesses needing to change for a digital world. We saw them needing to be optimized for a digital world. So we adapted yesterday's processes. We digitized yesterday's systems, yesterday's workflows in the name of modernization. But all we were really doing was modernizing with technology, not reimagining work for that digital era. Companies that reimagined their businesses for a digital world were companies like Amazon, Netflix, Uber. And what we're about to see, and by about, I mean like it's already happening, are the equivalent of AI-first companies. Companies that are using AI to transform what a business could be versus trying to adapt yesterday's digitization for AI. So to give you an example, the most common form of transformation that I'm seeing, and I use transformation in air quotes, is that the analog processes that were digitized are now the processes that are being automated. So think chatbots. But if you look at the headlines from companies like Shopify, Duolingo, Klarna, Box, these are not household names, but they are pretty big companies. And they are all now starting to reimagine their org charts with AI in their org charts. And I know this is highly controversial, but for example, the CEO of Shopify published a very infamous memo here in the Valley, in the tech circles, that said we cannot make any human hires, we cannot add headcount until you can demonstrate why artificial intelligence cannot do the job. They're also mandating that every single employee master artificial intelligence as part of their work, and it will now be part of their review cycle, their performance reviews. So things are speeding up pretty fast. And I can assure you that now that these companies are setting that bar, every company is setting those bars. I had a private conversation with an investor who said, yes, we're looking at our portfolio companies to stay, they call them, I know it's a strange name, tiny teams. We're looking at companies to hold tiny teams to see how fast and far we can scale on minimum investments using AI with humans. So at some point then, your boards of directors, your investors, your stakeholders, your shareholders are all going to start asking you the same question with no clue what the right answer should look like, but just because it's becoming the standard. So what we're really talking about is part technology, but we're coming back to that word transformation. And this is the hard part because most companies do not excel at transformation. In fact, studying corporate innovation over the past several decades, I've found that in reality, most corporations are designed not to innovate. It's not how companies scale. It's not how companies work. It's not how companies operate. They're designed to scale those efficiencies, which is why we get caught up into what I call a trap of iteration versus innovation. Iteration is doing what we did yesterday better. Innovation is doing what we didn't do yesterday to create new value. And so as a result, we're not dedicating the time, the space, the psychological safety, the incentives to help people start to figure out what's happening on the other side of the fence and what does it mean when companies start becoming AI first, or what is more commonly being now known as AI native. And as a result, you get headlines like this in The Economist, which provide false reassurance to companies that are not moving fast enough. What happened to that AI revolution? Well, what happened to that AI revolution is the same thing that happened with digital transformation. We're not seeing the ROI that we've been promised because we're not doing anything exceptional with AI. We're not changing the game, we're not changing our approach, and we're not changing the inputs to change the outputs. Just to give you an example, the bottom light purple bar represents C-suite executives, and the top purple bar represents employees. And this is just a state of the state. Regardless of how you're investing in AI or not investing in AI, there's already a perception gap that exists in all kinds of companies, which is, for example, 47% of employees feel that their company's approach to AI is well controlled and highly strategic. So that's less than half of employees, but almost 3/4 of executives feel the opposite. Employees feel that their company is not adopting AI fast enough, but executives feel like they are. Half of employees feel like they have an AI strategy. Almost 90% of executives feel like they do. And when you have disconnects like this, you now start to see, by the way, these are very similar to digital transformation back in the day, which means that we're not stopping and asking different questions in order to get the different answers that we need to start making headway. In fact, already, if you think about it, we're only 2 years into this whole AI revolution, it's already documented that companies outside of tech are not moving fast enough. They're not understanding the AI impact, regardless of whether or not you use ChatGPT or your kids use ChatGPT. We're not moving from a use standpoint or a use case standpoint to a strategic standpoint. But secretly, there's a really interesting report, and I'll make sure you get a copy of this deck as well. The really interesting report that shows, it's called the confessional study, where CEOs privately say that they feel like an AI agent could provide better counsel than their board. Now, whether that's possible or not, we don't know. But it is, again, that perception, that sentiment. And 90% of CEOs feel like AI can develop equal or better strategies than their exec team. So I can guarantee you, because I've been in these conversations, when the question is asked, well, how should we think about replacing workers with AI? They're never holding up a mirror to say, could AI come after my job? Well, according to CEOs, yes. And I bet you if you asked their exec teams and you asked their boards, they would say the same thing about CEOs. So these are interesting times because most companies, 99% of them, feel like they don't have this figured out at all. 1% of those companies feel like they do. I'd like to meet them. We just published at ServiceNow a report last week called the AI Index. This is the second year in a row where we've studied how companies are breaking down their AI investments, how are they or are not transforming. And what we learned, something very interesting. We have this index which scores companies on their AI maturity level out of 100 points. Last year, they averaged about 44 out of 100. And when you break them out into industries and sizes, it's all pretty much the same. But this year, their maturity went down from 44 to 35. So they actually went backwards. So we had to ask why. What's different about this year over last year? And it's quite a lot if you think about it. Last year, all anybody could talk about was generative AI. And the most common applications for it were chatbots. I want to give you a spoiler alert. No employee or customer wakes up in the morning and says, I hope today I get to talk to a chatbot. It is because those chatbots are programmed on yesterday's processes and standards. They're not thinking about how to use this technology in a way that's more human. But in the last year alone, we have new terminology. We have AI agents. We have agentic AI, which are not the same thing. AI agents are the individual, essentially, software that can perform specific tasks. And when they're integrated, they can perform those tasks in succession. And agentic AI becomes the orchestration system that manages all those agents. So when companies start to go backwards, well, we got to look at, okay, sure, things are becoming more complex. Things are getting faster. It's becoming much more overwhelming. And technically, people aren't skilled not just in how to use AI to change their business, but just to change their business at all. Change management has always been a struggle with organizations. So what you start to see is individual implementations of AI pilots. And those AI pilots essentially fortify yesterday's business and operational models. So essentially the silos that we've all talked about over the years. So which means you're not only putting AI within a siloed environment, you're already limiting AI because AI needs data in order to perform to its full potential. And now when you work in an era of AI agents, agents need to be able to break through the silo in order to work with other parts of the organization to fulfill their job. So think about an employee, a new employee who has to onboard. They need to get their laptop, they need to sign up for HR, they gotta get their payroll, they gotta get all of their benefits orchestrated. Now we're talking about multiple disciplines that an agent has to work across. So this means that we have to start thinking less about individual pilots and cross-functional pilots. across the organization for these things to work. And only 30% of the companies that we studied are thinking that way. And this is a big leap because now you're having conversations with different stakeholder groups within the organization that you haven't had conversations with in the past. IT has largely been IT, but then you have Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, saying earlier this year, I think this is a renaissance for IT. IT isn't just about making sure your systems are running. IT is now going to have to be the HR for AI agents moving forward, which means that they play a role within your organization. And this sounds crazy, but this is absolutely true. An agent has to be essentially hired the way that you'd hire an employee to do a specific role. That AI agent has to be trained. They have to be onboarded. They have to be put into the system almost like a digital employee. They have to be managed in terms of performance. And then they also have to recognize when they're done. So IT or whomever is the orchestrator has to know when those agents have to be replaced so they're off-boarded and the cycle continues. So when Jensen Huang makes a prediction like that, it's actually not too far off, at least in the scope of responsibilities. And then we also started to see that there was a gap in between all of the organizations we studied and the organizations that were a bit more progressive, because nobody's really advanced yet. And I wanted to share this with you because this isn't actually in the report, but this is something I noticed in the data, that those pace setters had specific attributes. And those attributes were that there was at least some kind of vision of what we could do that was different than what we were doing yesterday. That they recognized that they had to focus on talent. This is the most interesting conversation that we're not having. When we ask, will AI take my job? If you wanted to just be basic and controversial, I suppose, the answer is yes. But that's been true of every technology in history. So the question isn't whether or not AI is going to take my job. The question is, what is the job I need you to do in an era of AI, understanding that it's going to evolve? And that takes vision for where the company is going to go so that we can rethink the roles with AI, not AI. So that is a role definition conversation. These pace setters are actually also innovative. So that instead of just opening up centers of excellence or steering committees, they're opening up innovation centers to understand what they don't know, to track where these things are going, and start having those conversations with decision makers to say, we're not thinking big enough. Here's what we need to start talking about. The other one, which is a big one, is governance. So governance can be something as basic as, what are the rules? What are the guardrails around artificial intelligence? Is it okay for employees to log into ChatGPT during work hours or on their home systems or the work systems? That's the basic side of it. Governance can then be at scale. How do we use it in our work to be successful as part of that role definition conversation? The other thing that was really interesting is that they're looking at how to use AI. And this is a big differentiator because you don't hear about this one talked about enough. How to use AI to deliver better experiences. Experiences are divided into two camps. One is employee experiences. So when I log onto my system and I get work done, so say I'm an employee and I'm onboarding and I'm going across these multiple systems, is it intuitive? Is it easy? Or is it cumbersome, difficult, and I actually have this big sigh I have to let out before I open up my laptop? The customer is the same thing. If you think about customer service, think about your mobile phone provider, think about your cable provider. Nobody wants to ever have to call those companies. In fact, most of them probably get into like this psychological readiness before they call. There's a saying that your true character comes out after you have to say representative 100 times. So we put chatbots in front of those types of decision trees and systems. We're not actually rethinking how to give a better experience because an experience, if you just strip it down to its basic essence, is just the emotion that someone feels as they do something or use something or see something. And so this will be a big thing that you see over the next few years, hopefully, is that as your steering committees or your centers of excellence or whatever your group is that is focusing on artificial intelligence should also think about then how do we use this to deliver better experiences for employees and customers? Because this is how you start to reimagine what work looks like. You give it a sense of purpose. And if you remember in the previous slide, vision being one of the top things that sets leading companies apart, this goes into your vision. It should be articulated that we want to deliver a better experience, and this is what that experience should look like and feel like. So it really is now coming down to an individual question. What do you want to do about it? Because right now, most companies are just going right back into the status quo. There's one major telecom company out of the UK who has famously put out to their shareholders that they are going to eliminate 50,000 jobs with AI. And I think they're proud of that statement. But I want to challenge them and ourselves by making such statements before we even had definitions of the vision where AI can take us or how AI can help us deliver better experiences. We're already essentially announcing to the world that we're going to use AI to be the next status quo. We're going to lean in on automation. We're going to lean in on profitability. We're going to lean in on shareholder returns. And like that all sounds like a great checklist. But it also puts you in a position to be disrupted by AI native companies, which is what we saw with Amazon, Netflix, Uber, except this one becomes bigger at scale. And so that's, I think, where we have to challenge ourselves as we're thinking about strategy, as we're reading news, is are we thinking big enough? Are we thinking in a next generation status quo, or are we thinking now about exponential transformation? And here's where it gets hard. Because now essentially what you're doing is you're asking questions that you're not used to answering because you haven't really been put on the spot for it. Because it seems like we're doing really cool things. Any investment in AI seems innovative because we've never used artificial intelligence at this scale before, at this level. But if you're not challenging yourself to do something different with it, then you're doing what you did yesterday, better, faster, cheaper. I'll just tell them I'll call them back. Thank you. So we can't run tomorrow's business effectively if we're stuck in yesterday's logic. And we can't get the best employees. We can't attract the best customers or retain the best customers if we're not thinking differently about our operating model, our service model, our value add. So as someone who's come up in Silicon Valley since the 90s, I have constantly had to ask different questions to figure out every technology revolution and then also anticipate and advise companies on what is the next revolution that's coming for those who really wanted to prepare for it. And the one thing that I've said then and I say now is that if you're waiting for someone to tell you what to do, you're on the wrong side of innovation. I read pretty much every report that comes out, every consultant report, every think tank report, every analyst report, and there's usually a series of checkboxes at the end. Here's all the data, and now here's what I want you to do about it. Do this, do this, do this, do this. And I guarantee you that pretty much all of those reports are fortifying a new status quo. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but if you're not balancing that, you're not balancing iteration with innovation, then you do, by default, get stuck in a status quo model. So if we believe that AI offers something new for tomorrow that we haven't quite figured out, if we don't know what we don't know yet, then who has to help figure out what that means, what that looks like, and how we can turn that into value? So there are people we could assign that to, but as you saw with the CEO confessionals and as you saw in the reports between employees and CEO perceptions, I think that it's accountability. It's really about who owns this stuff. Where does the buck stop? It's not just one person. It's not just one hierarchical model. It's anyone who believes that they want to play a leading role in discovering the unknown, mastering uncertainty, to figure out what we don't know, and in the process of trying to figure that out, starting to figure out what we can learn and unlearn and move forward. So is our vision and our strategy bold enough? Have we honestly evaluated what AI execution could look like beyond what we're doing today? Are we having real, meaningful conversations about our teams in an era not just of AI agents, but right behind AI agents are what's called a digital employee. So if you think about agents that can perform a specific task, say booking a meeting, or a series of agents like booking your travel, at some point, you're going to have a vertical stack of capabilities that a digital employee could do by itself, every day, 24/7. So even when we think we're figuring something out, we have to keep thinking bigger. And that's why disruption starts with ourselves. The biggest opportunity, the lowest hanging fruit that helps you start moving in this direction is when we think about cross-functional workflows. So your pilots that span different parts of the organization, whether it has to get data, whether it has to talk to a decision maker, those have the biggest organizational impact. And they also start to show ROI faster than other pilots because now what you're doing is changing how your company works with AI. The hardest part of this actually isn't the implementation of the pilot or the selection of the vendors. The hardest part of this is you having a conversation with people you don't normally work with to create interest and buy-in to be part of that pilot with you. And that collectively, your group defines in that pilot what the future of work could look like by default. And your win in terms of ROI demonstrates then if we do more of this at scale, we actually change not just how our company works, but we're demonstrating what the future of our organization looks like. And I call that an AI-first mindset. Right now, we think with a digital-first or an iteration-first mindset, and that's normal, it's human, it's totally fine. Even I do that. But I challenge myself, I want to get t-shirts made with this, hashtag WWAID, which is, what would AI do? And I think about that question every time I'm putting together a strategy, every time I'm thinking about making a difficult decision, every time I'm thinking about a roadmap. What would AI do? And before I use AI, I go through this mental exercise of trying to think about how it would be different than what I know I would do, because I know what I would do. I'll give you an example. Today, if you use, for example, Microsoft Office, if you have Copilot, it's embedded in your email, it's embedded in your Word doc. When you use those tools, that is not WWAID. That is, what would you do, enhanced by AI? You want this email to sound better? You want this Word document to look better? Or your PowerPoints to look better? It's just taking what you're doing and sprucing it up with AI. It's dangerous because it lulls us into this belief that we're using AI to be much more powerful. But I'll give you a psychological sort of parallel. When you use Google Maps, you erode your sense of direction. It's just a fact. When you use your contacts on your phone, you erode your memory's ability to keep phone numbers in your brain. Just a fact. We lean on technology. It makes us more efficient, but it's not WWAID. In fact, it's the opposite. So there's this piece. I'll ask the team to send it to you. I wrote it in a Harvard Business Review recently. It was 12 exercises using generative AI to break your habits of what you would do versus what AI would do. It starts to introduce exponential thinking, and the more you do this, it's called neuroplasticity. You're literally rewiring your brain so that this becomes your standard protocol. Because as you're thinking about that, what you start to do is you now realize that there are different potential use cases for AI that you've ever considered. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's pretty wild. You show up differently in meetings, your ideas are different, your vision, your direction is different. And the way I think about it this way is WWAID helps you achieve outcomes that you couldn't achieve without AI and AI couldn't achieve without you. And that's what makes this an exponential growth opportunity. So I'd like you to think about two things. One is iterative AI, which is how do I use AI to do what we did better, because that's what we should do moving forward, not because that's the way we've always done it. That's a pretty critical question. And the other one is, what are we not doing? What are we not thinking about? That's innovative AI. Because your strategy should have both. And it's innovative AI that's actually going to disrupt business models and entire industries. So it's a question, do you want to wait for it to happen, or do you want to be part of it happening? I'll give you an example. If we don't challenge how we work, and we assume that that's the best way to do it because it's the way we've always done it, we get caught into this cycle of iteration. And I like to think about ketchup when I think about AI, don't you? That bottle is from 1890 on the left. This is a more modern bottle. The thing about the first bottle is that it really isn't that effective. It holds ketchup, but every single one of you has a strategy to get ketchup out of that bottle. Not because it was designed to deliver ketchup in the most effective manner. Whether it's beating the palm of your hand, whether it's a knife, whether it's brute force and you hope it doesn't go everywhere. And then somebody said, there's got to be a better way. Oh yeah, well how about gravity and a gentle squeeze? But then if you challenge yourself to keep thinking and make that part of your model, your routine of how you approach opportunities, whether there's a given solution or a given challenge, right? Because there was a challenge, now there's a solution, but I don't know, could we keep going?
So that is very true, actually. Come here. I wrote a paper on ketchup bottle development when I was in college. Right. The original glass ketchup bottle was made in 1890, but then they made a squeezable ketchup bottle in 1983. But it was still difficult to get ketchup out of the bottle. So they made what's called an upside down container, or a gravity container, which was in 2001. And that's the one that you see right there. So I'm going to show you guys why that works. Now, if you were to squeeze a gravity bottle from the front like this, you have to physically squeeze for it to come out. But if you were to squeeze the bottle from the sides and then release, all the pressure is going to push out the ketchup on its own. So take a look. I squeeze the sides. It just releases like that. Super easy.
I know what we're all doing this afternoon, right? There's always a different way to see something. And that's what I call that AI first mindset, is you're training yourself to see things differently, to keep asking questions that unlock hidden gems and unknown knowns. So that legacy mindset, that iteration mindset, creates a nice linear path of potential growth. Asking different questions is unlocking the unknown. Some of it's going to fail, and fail is a good word here. Some of it's going to succeed, and those things that start to succeed create exponential growth because you wouldn't have done them otherwise. And if you add that to your linear growth, you now break out of that AI status quo that we were talking earlier about. Because now what you're doing, for example, cross-functional pilots, is actual transformation. So there's questions that we get locked into that hold us into that iteration mindset. Not that we're going to go through all of these, but when you get the deck, just ask yourself, are these the questions that I'm asking? How could you do this faster? How could I do this cheaper? How can we improve ROI based on today's standards for ROI? How can we take out effort? These are the types of questions that you start to answer about AI that says we can confidently make a prediction that we're going to let 40,000 jobs go. Because you figured out that AI is going to allow you to do some of these things. But an AI-first mindset is going to get to root causes. Why are we experiencing these issues? Why aren't we achieving exponential growth? The questions in tandem then give you your linear line for growth and your potential for exponential growth. They're just different questions, and on the other side of these questions are answers. And so when you start to look, say in hindsight, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, at the progress that you're going to make, you will start to see that those questions lead to innovative AI opportunities that you otherwise wouldn't have invested in. And the delta between the linear growth and the exponential growth, economists will study as disruption. Your competitors will feel it as disruption. That's the gap between the status quo and AI native companies. So I know this gets complicated, but this is why it's so important for you to now start thinking beyond the role that you play within the organization, because someone's got to lead that transformation. Someone's got to challenge the status quo. Someone's got to say that automation is the iterative part of our investment.
A 22-year-old in India just created the first ChatGPT homework machine. This machine will write out all your assignments in your own handwriting. All you have to do is position the paper in the right spot. It even turns the pages for you. As ChatGPT use becomes more common among students, tools like this might make it harder for educators to determine what's real and what's automated. Personally, I feel like if you're smart enough to build an entire machine that automates your homework, you should never have to do homework again.
It's probably true. That's really innovative, at least on paper, pun intended. But all it's doing is using AI to do what you did yesterday, which is to write out your homework. So as innovative as that looks, that's iteration. It's not innovation. And then we start to ask questions like, all right, how much did we save? How much productivity did we increase? But the question to ask is, well, what are you going to do with that time? What are you going to do with those resources that you saved? Because that's where innovation can unlock. And this is what I call augmentation. How can you do with AI, so remember, WWAID, how can you do with AI what you couldn't do yesterday? How can you achieve outcomes that you couldn't do without AI and AI couldn't do without you? And that creates new use cases. That creates the foundations for more innovative AI pilots. So instead of artificial intelligence, I start to think about it now as augmented intelligence. I challenge myself every single time. Am I doing what I did yesterday better, or am I unlocking new use cases? This is what augmented AI could look like. This person has a pair of Meta AI glasses on. I do want to say that I also have these glasses. And my use case, at least to my wife, to justify buying them, was we went to Italy. They have AI built right into the glasses. Connects with your phone. And we went to Italy as a family. I could read a menu. I could read signs. I could listen to Italian and have everything translated to English in real time. I could look at a historical landmark and I could ask it what I was looking at and not only have it tell me, but give me the historical significance of it. So I was now walking around looking like some weirdo talking to myself, but fully augmented. She can't see, but she's going to show you her application for these glasses.
Not only that, but they're amazing for those who are blind or low vision, because you can use the glasses to ask Meta AI about almost anything that it sees, and you can get pretty specific with the questions too. Hey Meta, look, what section of the store is this?
This is the dog treats section.
Hey Meta, look, what kind of treats are these?
The package says Red Barn Protein Puffs Training Treats. It's a high-protein treat for dogs, made with natural ingredients and no artificial preservatives or flavors.
Oh, that sounds nice.
So I'm not the only one talking to myself. But it now starts to unlock really cool use cases like, well, what else could I do? And when you start asking what else can I do, or what can I do with time saved or resources saved, I think one of my favorite examples is IKEA. They, like many other companies, introduced an AI-powered chatbot. This AI-powered chatbot was so successful that it solved 57% of first-round engagements, meaning that customers were able to get their answers and move on. And when you have something hit at 57%, you have conversations about headcount. Do we need all of these service agents, or can we free up that budget elsewhere? And that's pretty much the automated AI status quo mindset. But when you start asking questions about augmentation, or if you start asking AI first questions like, well, what were those 57% of calls about? What were the 43% that couldn't get solved? And start diving deeper into that, you recognize, like what IKEA recognized, was that those were interior design calls. These were customers that were either for business or for their homes trying to find out information about dimensions, use cases, potentiality in a particular design setting, and they couldn't get their answers met. And what IKEA recognized is that those agents that were going to probably lose their jobs could be reskilled as interior designers to then lead a new business service for those 43%, for example, where they spun it out as a pilot, and after 1 year, that new service generated 1 billion euro. So save money over here, generate exponential growth over here. It's a different way of thinking. And now when you scale that mindset with AI agents and eventually digital employees, you now have potential that they make movies about. But it's totally possible. For example, not that I use the Bumble app because my wife would probably not like it, but it's a dating app for those that don't know. And this is the CEO talking about the future of Bumble with AI agents. Actually, this is more like digital employees or digital twins. Essentially, AI agents will understand how to be like you, and they will go out 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, dating other AI agents. And they will come back to you and report who you should date in real life. I suppose you'd have to actually want to date, and I don't know if that's the purpose of these dating apps. It's a different conversation. But that's a very real application. And eventually, we're going to move to a place where human orchestrators are letting these AI agents and digital employees operate all the time, in specific limited categories at first. So much so that the Wall Street Journal just ran an article, I think about a week ago, about the fact that what we're not talking about is once you have these capabilities, what happens in a world where certain tasks can be executed all day, every day by these agents? How does it change your operating model? How does it change what we're tasking human and machine collaboration with? How are we measuring success? And are we going to be relegated to just that AI status quo? Or are we going to challenge ourselves to start having bigger, more exponential measures beyond time, productivity, and resources? It also begs different questions if you really want to have a couple glasses of wine and think about it. Are we at the end of the large enterprise? Could a small, medium-sized business with AI scale to outperform the biggest companies in the world? Well, that's what tiny teams or these AI native companies are starting to figure out. So I want to leave you with this. We don't have the answers. And again, if we're waiting for someone to tell us what to do, we're on the wrong side of innovation. This is that moment where asking different questions, maybe remembering what would AI do, will help you in challenging your own assumptions, which should start to break conventions, which should start to help you see the difference between an iterative decision and a potentially innovative decision, and your ability to create a new role of leadership for you in bringing everyone around you, everyone within your organization, everyone within your ecosystem to up-level how they're thinking about all of this so that you break free from that linear line and work towards a more exponential line. And if there ever was a time for leaders to come from anywhere within the organization, it's now. So this is your time. Thank you very much.